Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshutarine Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangolam Ghayate Girim Yatkripas-tamahang bande shikurum dinataranam Vanchakapataro vyascha kripasindhu vaivacha Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta-vindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Swasyastu vispasya kalo prasidatam Danyantu bhutani shivam vitodiya Manasya badram bhajata tadhoksaje Aveshatam no matirapya hoituki. This prayer is a prayer of Prahlad Maharaj from the 5th canto of SRIMAD BHAGAVATAM. Here's a translation. May the entire universe be blessed with peace and good hope. May everyone driven by envy and enmity become pacified and reconciled. May all living beings develop abiding concern for the welfare of others. May our own hearts and minds be filled with purity and serenity. May all these blessings flow naturally from this supreme benediction. May our attention become absorbed in the rapture of love unto the transcendent Lord. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for joining us here in Africa. So in this very important conversation, the great Maharaj Parikshit is addressing the personification of Dharma, who is appearing in the form of a bull. So the question that's being asked here, or the question that I would ask, or what I would discern from this verse and purport is, what does it mean to be offenseless and thoroughly honest? In Srila Prabhupada's purport, he talks about how the cows and bulls are symbols of the most offenseless living beings. How even the stool and urine of these animals can be used to benefit human society for cooking, for medicine, so many ways. So the 3 legs of the bull, who is Dharma, have been cut off. And so we can just try to visualize, he must be just hobbling on one leg, a 4-legged creature just with only one leg. How can he even stand, right? So that remaining leg is truthfulness. And yet we can see these days, we hear all around us about fake news, right? And it's very hard to tell. This is the one leg that Dharma is still standing on, but yet that leg itself is very, very weak. It's very hard to tell these days what is truth and what is untruth. Sometimes the governments are blocking information from coming into their country, and the people of that country don't even know what their government may be doing. So these days, leaders are speaking what's convenient and what the foolish citizens want to hear to get them elected and re-elected. So what are these other 3 legs that have already been cut off? They're described as austerity, cleanliness, and mercy. So now only truthfulness, this Dharma bull, is standing hobbling on this one shaky leg of truthfulness. So in his purport, Srila Prabhupada's Srimad Bhagavatam purport, that coming up a little bit, he says, by pride, either artificial or real, sometimes someone may be proud about maybe they have some great qualifications. So he says, by pride, artificial or real, the resultant action of austerity is spoiled. By too much affection for, he's talking about illicit association between men and women, cleanliness is spoiled. By too much addiction to intoxication, mercy is spoiled. And by too much lying propaganda, truthfulness is spoiled. So, you know, so much lying propaganda. We've heard that sound travels in the ether, right? So when there's so much lying propaganda, it actually contaminates the subtle ether where the sound is traveling. And so we can see it's so, so important. We may not even realize how very, very urgently important it is for the benefit of the world that devotees everywhere are performing this Harinam Sankirtan everywhere in the world and sending up this sacred vibration of Krishna's holy name all over the world. So to counteract the contamination that's being thrown into the ether everywhere by the internet, by politicians, by, you know, everyone who's lying and cheating, right? So how important that Harinam Sankirtan is. So then the question comes up, what would it mean, or what would it look like to be offenseless and thoroughly honest? So somewhere we've heard this phrase, thoroughly honest, before. And where have we heard that phrase before? It's in Srila Prabhupada's preface to his first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And he's very humbly admitting his frailties in presenting Srimad Bhagavatam. You know, it was a very poor printing. There were editing mistakes. But he says, so humbly, he says, but I am hopeful of its good reception by the thinkers and leaders of society on the strength of the following statement of Srimad Bhagavatam. And he quotes Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, 5th chapter, 11th verse. Is a very important verse that says, Tadvag visargo janatagya viplavo yasmin pratislokam abhadyate api namantyanantasta yason kitani yach Shinvanti, Gayanti, Grinanti Sadhava. So this is a very, very important verse for Srimad Bhagavatam. In English, it says, on the other hand, that literature, which is full of descriptions of the transcendental glories of the name, fame, form, and pastimes of the unlimited Supreme Lord, is a transcendental creation meant for bringing about a revolution. This is so revolutionary. I love this, right? What is this Srimad Bhagavatam for? Are we supposed to just like read it, have a good time, forget about it? No, it's meant to bring about a revolution in the impious lives of a misguided civilization, misdirected civilization. And then this is the part that Srila Prabhupada in particular is quoting. He says, such transcendental literature, even though irregularly composed, is heard, sung, and accepted by purified men who are thoroughly honest. And then he says, Om Tat Sat. So yeah, this is Srila Prabhupada's beautiful humility in presenting Srimad Bhagavatam, asking his readers to forgive him and to tolerate his frailties in presenting Srimad Bhagavatam. You know, I often think of how Srila Prabhupada could have maybe sent some cases of Srimad Bhagavatam on the Jaladuta ship and maybe saved himself the trouble of traveling himself. But no, he came himself. He brought the Srimad Bhagavatams and he set a personal example of what it means to be a living Bhagavata and how to present Bhagavatam in our lives, how to hear it, really hear it and learn it and learn to live it, you know. So so what does it mean to be offenseless? We just talked a little bit about being thoroughly honest, right? To be able to tolerate someone else's frailties is the point he's making, right? What about being offenseless? In Bhagavad Gita, 12th chapter, Krishna talks about many verses about what are the qualities of someone who's dear to him? And I particularly love these couple of points. He says, he for whom no one is put into difficulty. Isn't that beautiful? He for whom no one is put into difficulty, right? And he who is not disturbed by anyone, who is not dependent on the ordinary course of activities. In other words, I don't need this, this, and this to do my bhakti or to chant my rounds. No, to just be able to not be dependent on this or that or the other thing, and to just live simply and live humbly and try to serve Krishna in a thoroughly honest and offenseless way. Yeah. And then in the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, there's the components of knowledge, Bhagavad Gita 13th chapter, 8 through 13. And it's always been so interesting to me that the first 5, okay, what's knowledge? That's the question, right? What's knowledge? And the first 5 things that define what is knowledge are all about, well, here's the list of the first 5. Humility, pridelessness, they sound similar, right? Humility, being without pride, nonviolence, tolerance, and simplicity, right? So isn't that amazing that Krishna makes this point so emphatically, that if you want to be someone of knowledge, this is where you begin, right? And then what about Bhagavad Gita 17th chapter, 15th verse, where Krishna describes the austerities of speech, speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and not agitating to others, and regularly reciting Vedic literature. So it's also very interesting to me that this same point is stated in Islam in a slightly different way. In Islam, the followers are directed, before speaking something, we should pause and we should stop and consider, is what I'm about to say, is it true? And the next question is it necessary that I even say this? And the third one, which is so important, is it kind? Isn't that a beautiful 3 considerations? Is it true? So often we speak so loosely, harming others and harming ourselves, really, right? But to consider before opening my trap, right? To think, is it true? Is it necessary that I even say this? And is it kind, to others, to myself? And then another point about being offenseless that I think is really beautiful and important. In SRIMAD Bhagavatam purport, it's again the first canto, 18th chapter, 22nd verse. Srila Prabhupada says, real nonviolence. We're talking about nonviolence here. Here, this Kali personified is being violent to the personification of Dharma. So Srila Prabhupada says in that purport that real nonviolence means freedom from envy. Isn't that interesting? Wow. If I could become free from envy, I could be a thoroughly nonviolent person. So it's not just, as some people say, or I think in Buddhism, it's a tradition, do no harm. So that's not enough. It's not enough to do no harm. It actually means to become offenseless. And in the way the Bhagavad Gita takes it further, to become offenseless and to become thoroughly honest and to become free from envy. So beautiful. So yeah, I was thinking that, as human beings, we can't really come up to the standard of the bulls and the cows, that even their stool and urine is beneficial. That just doesn't work for human beings. But as human beings, that we have other responsibilities in exemplifying Dharma that are expected of us. So what is Dharma really? Dharma is kind of a popular word, and I guess it was in the 50s or 60s, there was this book by Jack Kerouac, Dharma Bums, and the word is kind of thrown around a lot in the yoga world. And I know sometimes people that I know, people in the Hindu community will say, oh yeah, he's a really dharmic guy. So what does that mean, to be a really dharmic guy? Yeah, so, and at the end of the Gita, Krishna says, okay, to Arjuna, just just give up all dharmas, right? Whoa, where does that leave me? And what about the second verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam? Dharma prochita kaitravo. Yeah, to kick out. It says Srimad Bhagavatam is here to speak to you, to kick out all dharmas, all cheating dharmas, right? So what is what is Krishna talking about? What's Srimad Bhagavatam talking about? What is real dharma and what's cheating dharma? So real dharma is defined by Yamaraj, who's the Lord of Dharma in the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And he gives the definition of dharma, that dharmang tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam, that dharma is created by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's not made up by some scholar or some sophisticated author, or we hear about Manava Dharma and this Dharma and that Dharma. But real Dharma can only be enacted by the Supreme Lord, not by others who want to make up something new. And so that's an important point. So that the path of bhakti, the path of Krishna consciousness, is about taking the essence of all dharma, which is stated also in the 1st canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Savai punsam paro dharma, yato bhaktir adhoksaje, ahaitakiya pritiyata yayatma suprasidati. It means that the verse means that only this essential dharma is going to really satisfy us, me, you, and everyone. To offer service to Krishna that's not motivated by any selfishness, and that's also uninterrupted, that I'm always trying to remember Krishna, always trying to do something to serve Krishna. And so this unmotivated, uninterrupted dharma or bhakti, only that can really satisfy the self. That definition is given in Srimad Bhagavatam 1st canto also. So going on about this point about being thoroughly honest and being offenseless, that's exemplified by Dharma the bull. So another important point is that Parikshit Maharaj, so he's a great, powerful Kshatriya, he's got his sword, right? And so he's asking the bull very honestly, who has done this to you? And the bull, he's the personification of Dharma, and he doesn't want to name the aggressor. It's really, really interesting. Isn't that so different from you and me? Where we call out someone else, he's the one, get him, get her, always saying something possibly offensive or harmful to someone else. But no, he doesn't want to name. He's Dharma personified. He doesn't want to name. And he gives so many different reasons. These are in the verses that are coming up in this chapter. Well, it's very difficult to ascertain. This philosopher says this, and that one says that. And basically he's exemplifying the mood of a devotee, the mood of someone who lives and tries to live in a dharmic way. To not call out the one who has offended me. Well, there are 5 factors of action, right? The body, the performer, the senses, the endeavor, and ultimately the supersoul has to give sanction for anything to happen, right? The good or the bad, right? Supersoul has to give sanction. And then after that, Maharaj Parikshit, he praises the bull. He says, you know the truth of Dharma, because the same destination is intended for the perpetrator of irreligious acts. Someone who does bad things is also intended for someone who identifies the perpetrator. So this may be a little hard to understand. Does this mean that, what does this mean when bad things happen? Maybe you're a witness to a crime. Should you just stand there and say nothing or run away? What does it exactly mean? So, I'm reminded of how Jesus Christ said, hate the sin, not the sinner. Or have you ever heard this one before, that every saint has his past? Like Valmiki. the speaker of the Ramayana, such a great saint. He was a murderer before, but he had a future. He became the great saint, the speaker of the Ramayana. So every sinner has a future. And we should try to see every living being the way Krishna sees. Try to see the potential of every living being, how by the grace of the Guru and Krishna and the path of devotional service, just by cultivating the path of bhakti, even a sinful wretch like me can be saved, you know? And yeah, every sinner has a future and every saint has a past. Such a beautiful meditation. Srila Prabhupada says in one of his purports in the Bhagavad Gita that a pure devotee sees all living beings just like a kindly father or mother sees his or her children. So to unpack this a little further, a devotee needs to be tolerant of offenses to me, to myself, but more intolerant of offenses against others. And a devotee tries to protect others against offenses. And the attitude of a devotee is, what can I do to help smooth the path of others? It's a very sacred work to be a humble path smoother. It's a very sacred service. And sometimes devotees on the path of bhakti become a little bit proud that, I'm a Brahmin, I'm a this or that. No, we should be very humble, because we can see in this first canto that the whole culture was brought down by the false pride of this young boy Brahmin who was proud and unqualified. So we hear a lot about not offending devotees. We have that prayer in our temples that we say every day that I also chanted at the beginning of this class, that the devotees of the Lord are just like desire trees, and they can fulfill the desires of everyone because they're so full of compassion. So Srila Prabhupada instituted the chanting of this prayer in our temples because he could see that devotees were offending other devotees. And it's very, very dangerous for our devotional service to be offending others by our pride, by our intolerance, and so much just carelessness, right? Just kind of trampling along in my life and not seeing how I may be harming or causing a problem on the path of someone else. But what about taking offense? Like, okay, we shouldn't commit offenses to other devotees. And that doesn't just mean your Guru Maharaj when he comes to town, you jump over everybody in the temple to bring him his garland. No, it means every devotee. And the fact is, someone who's wise sees every living being as dear to Krishna, because that's what Krishna says. Every living being is dear to him. So every living being has that potential. But what about not taking offense if someone, maybe offends me? There's a beautiful story in the Chaitanya Charitamrita of when there was a crowd of devotees at the Ratha Yatra, and one of the devotees kind of bumped into one of the other ones, and he's saying, "Oh, I'm sorry." And the devotee was so tolerant. He said, "Oh no, this is the perfection of my life, that you've touched me. I've been touched by a Vaishnava. Thank you. So, we should have that kind of humility to not commit offenses to anyone, really, to be conscious, to not commit offenses to anyone. I know in the morning when I go to the temple, when I get in my car machine, and, I say a little prayer that, my dear Lord Krishna, please let me not harm any living being with this machine. There's so many deer in the dark running across the road in our area. And let me not harm any living being with this car machine. So to kind of walk the world, to tread lightly, to think like that. Let me not harm any living being in a human species or an animal species. To not commit offenses, and to not take offense if someone may have inadvertently or maybe intentionally harmed me. So then in this purport, Srila Prabhupada draws a contrast between the real protectors of society, like Maharaj Parikshit, like his grandfather, Maharaj Yudhisthira, like Lord Ram, and contrast them to the irresponsible leaders, executive heads of society today. So you can see when we read Srimad Bhagavatam, you can see that these previous leaders were so exemplary. They were so afraid of harming their reputation by deviating from Dharma, like deviating from truth, like Lord Ramachandra's father, King Dasarath. He'd rather die than deviate from fulfilling a promise he'd given way, way, way years ago in the past, right? Because they wanted their dharmic reputation to live on, to never be forgotten. And even today, thousands of years later, their reputation is still living on, right? Or what about another example? Krishna's father, Vasudeva, in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, in the beginning of the 10th canto of Krishna book, that his truthfulness was so exemplary that he made such a painful, selfless promise to the evil Kamsa. But yeah, today the religious leaders, they're not even afraid of killing offenseless living beings like cows and bulls. I even heard when I was in India that the biggest exporter of meat in India, cow slaughter, that company is owned by a man who's a Brahmin, a so-called Brahmin. Isn't that so objectionable, the fallen nature of so-called Brahmins today? I also heard a Jewish friend, he was in Israel, and he was asking a rabbi in Israel, what's the meaning of this kosher diet that the Jewish people follow, to not eat milk and meat at the same time? And this one rabbi was actually a vegetarian rabbi in the city of Haifa. And he said, yeah, what it really means is that we shouldn't take from the cow in a spirit of violence, and at the same time take something that the cow is giving freely out of mercy. We shouldn't take those two things at the same time. So isn't that significant? And to me, like a thoughtful person would say, well, why then? Why should we take from the cow in a spirit of violence at all? And I think a lot of young people, forward-thinking people, Jewish people are thinking, wow, the best thing really is to be a vegetarian. Like when we have interfaith events and we want to entertain Jewish people and Muslim people and Christian people, well, the best thing is that everything's vegetarian offered to Krishna, right? And then no one's dietary regulations will be harmed, because what's the point of those regulations anyway? Cause no harm, right? Be offenseless. So another example of a cheating dharma that we hear today is some so-called religious people will say, oh, animals have no souls. So there's no sin in killing animals because they don't have any souls. Well, hey, what's the symptom of the presence of the soul? They're breathing, and they cry. If you approach them to harm them, they'll cry just like we will cry. They give birth, they live, they have children, they live for some time, and then they die. And then, isn't that a symptom of life? Isn't that a symptom of the soul? So Srila Prabhupada always speaks about how the animals who are born in a country, they're also praja. They're also citizens of the land. They're also born in that land just like us. So why should they not be protected? Just because someone wants to indulge their tongue in eating them. Srila Prabhupada also, you hear him often give an example. If a father has so many sons, and one of them is not particularly intelligent, what if the other sons come to the father and say, hey, Dad, this brother of ours, he's really a dullard. He's a dope. Can't we just cut him up, cook him, and eat him? I mean, what's the point of his even taking up space? No. Will the father tolerate that? No, the father will say, no, let him live at my expense, right? he's also my son, just like you're my son. Let him live at my expense. And that's how the beneficence of Mother Earth, right? I don't know if any of you have ever heard the recording of Srila Prabhupada's conversation with Cardinal Danilou in France. And Prabhupada was really hammering him about, you know, the Bible says, thou shalt not kill. Why are you killing? He was really hammering him, as he often does. You'll hear him say that so often. But then this really quite arrogant cardinal, he says with his French accent, well, you see, we see animals are also eating other animals, right? So, hey, you know, are you supposed to be, come on, Cardinal Danilou, maybe you have a big position in the church, but are you supposed to live like a vicious brute, like an animal? Aren't you supposed to be in the human form of life? So to me, this brings to mind a poem, the last couple of stanzas of a beautiful poem by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, where he says, the poem is called The Jiva Soul. I don't know if you've seen it before. It's quite a long poem. But he says, was man intended to be a brute in work and heart? Should man, the Lord of all around, from common sense depart? And then the next stanza, he says, man's glory is in common sense, dictating us the grace that man is made to live and love the beauteous heavens embrace. Isn't that beautiful? So come on, everybody, we're supposed to have common sense. You know, if you're going to scream when someone tries to harm you, aren't the animals also going to feel pain? So yeah, to summarize the points that I brought out here, we looked at the 4 principles of religion and how they're spoiled. They are austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness. And by pride, austerity is spoiled. By illicit association between men and women, cleanliness is spoiled. By addiction to intoxication, mercy is spoiled. And by lying propaganda, truthfulness is spoiled. And we talked about how the cows and bulls are so offenseless. And we talked about what does it mean to be thoroughly honest, to tolerate another person's frailties, and what does it mean to be offenseless, to not be putting other people into difficulty. And then before we speak, to consider, to pause, right? Take a red light, right? Pause and think, is what I'm about to say, is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? And then I love this point about how real nonviolence is to become free from envy and to tolerate offenses to ourselves and not commit offenses to others. So these are a few thoughts on this beautiful verse and purport of Srimad Bhagavatam. Thank you so much. Are there any takeaways or what was important for you, or are there any points you'd like to make or any questions? Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees, thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for being with us and speaking to us, enlightening us, Mother Rukmini.
Hare Krishna.
The class you gave is fully loaded. I believe, excuse me, I believe lots of devotees may have questions. And if anyone has a question, you may indicate that by using the hand emoji.
Or even not a question, but what was important for you? What are you going to share with your kids or your wife or your husband or someone in your office? What was important for you? What's the takeaway? The
takeaway, yes. Your pizza takeaway. Well, I have a question, Mother Rukmini. My question has to do with, I hope my question doesn't take over the other questions other devotees may have, because it's quite a very salient concern we all have. As devotees or aspiring devotees, we all know how dangerous it is offending devotees. And as such, I believe every devotee tries in his or her own little best to avoid committing offenses. But my question is, who determines that an offense has been made or created or caused? I looked up the definition of offending, and it says to cause someone to feel upset, to get someone annoyed or get someone resentful. Now, I may do something or say something that I did not intend offending, but the other person may feel being offended. Like, excuse me, in the case of Rupa Goswami and Krishna Das. Rupa Goswami was just meditating and having beautiful vision of Krishna and the gopis in the spiritual world, and Krishna Das, who was coming in to see Rupa Goswami. Rupa Goswami did not even see him, but just by seeing Rupa Goswami laughing, we all know this story. He thought that the Rupa Goswami was laughing at him, and then
he had a physical malady.
Disabilities. Yes.
Yeah, he had a physical disability.
Yeah, so he thought he was laughing at his disabilities, which Rupa Goswami had not even opened his eyes to see him. But merely him having such a feeling, according to Sanatana Goswami, he told Rupa Goswami that was your problem. And how can we tell people, hey, do not feel bad? We cannot control what others feel or do. So what do we do?
Thank you for this very important question, because as Dharma the Bull was saying, it's very, very difficult to ascertain, when I may have hurt someone's feelings. Maybe I don't even know. And not even, I just feel like we need to broaden it out. It's not just devotees, because every living being is Krishna's precious, beloved living being. In the Chaitanya Bhagavat, in one place, Lord Chaitanya says, every living being is my beloved part and parcel. And anyone who causes harm to any one of them, I will destroy him. He's a little heavy. He says, I will destroy him. Anyone who causes pain to any one of the innumerable living entities. So, whoa, that's pretty heavy. How do we avoid that? So I think we have to really, really be very, very careful, be very circumspect, be very careful, be very respectful, to really pray, let me not be arrogant, let me not be proud, and let me always see how I can be serving everyone and not harming anyone. And you know what? If I feel like, whoa, maybe something I said this morning hurt that person's feelings, then you know what's such a good thing? To just go back and say, Prabhu, I think I didn't mean to, but I think what I said to you this morning might have caused you some pain, and I'm so sorry for that. So please forgive me. And then you have the chance to hear from that person, well, actually, I did feel a little bit bad. Or maybe they'll say, no, I didn't feel bad at all. But at least on my side, I'm being very, very careful to not offend anyone and to be very humble in the way I, not that I'm just tromping through the world in my big army boots, just trampling over everyone and everything without any discrimination, without any discernment. Everywhere I walk, I should be very careful, and not just in the temple. Like sometimes devotees feel like, okay, I'm being careful not to offend devotees. As soon as I get out of the temple, I'm on my own. Hey, I don't know if I've ever told this story on this platform, but we used to have 3 stores in the Washington area. And once one of the managers of one of our stores was in the grocery store a couple doors down from our store. And she saw someone who she knew was a devotee who came into our store. She was, a friend of mine. And she saw this devotee being very, very rude to the cashier in the grocery store. And this manager of ours was a very sensitive person. And she came to me and she said, I'm so surprised to see, one of your Krishna conscious devotees acting like that to the cashier in the grocery store. She was shocked, actually. So devotees should be so exemplary, so humble, that people should be always inquiring, what is it about you? You guys are so kind. I never met anybody so nice, so kind, so humble, so sweet, so caring, you know, and to not neglect anyone out in the street or in the temple. Or I just told this story yesterday. I was being interviewed for South Africa, and my husband Anutama Prabhu has this story that when we were trying to build a restaurant in our Denver temple, we needed the permission of the city, of course. And this inspector came to inspect to make sure everything was, you know, up to the legal standards. And Anutama Prabhu said to him, oh, have you ever been to our temple before? He said, yeah, I was here once before. Somebody called me a demon. So, you know, just one devotee being rude and arrogant like that could have cost us our ability to open a restaurant, because this was the man who was deciding whether we were approved or not. So it doesn't have to be so extreme, but Krishna's watching. And so your question was, who decides? So better be careful, right? Because Krishna's watching. If we're devotees, we're thinking Krishna's watching every word, every deed, everything I do. So Krishna will decide. So better be careful, right? So I hope that helps. Thank you.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. I know there are two, probably more hands up, but if I may follow up, Mother Rukmini, thank you for the answer. Anyway, to follow up with that is, by definition, the word offending means you're causing someone to feel hurt. Someone is upset at what you did or said. And how does a devotee, especially a preaching devotee, avoid offending? Because we understand Srila Prabhupada himself was apologizing to some of his god brothers when he was about to leave his body. But the devotees were intelligent enough, and they were telling me, no, Srila Prabhupada, you did not offend anybody, because when you was preaching, you're going to say some things that the person you're speaking to may feel hurt, feel upset at what you're saying. But as a matter of duty, one has to say it, because in preaching, there are certain words one may have to use, even though one may not intend insulting or showing disrespect to the person he's speaking to.
So Prabhu, I would say that it's very, very important as people who are aspiring. We're just aspiring to the path of bhakti. We can't really say that we're devotees yet. A devotee is a very, very rare and elevated person. So we're just aspiring for that. And the fact is, we can't imitate Srila Prabhupada. Sometimes Srila Prabhupada would say, I can say these things, you cannot. Yeah. So if Srila Prabhupada would be blasting this or blasting that, he was on a very exalted platform. And he could say things perhaps about Gandhi or this or that we can't say. So better in our preaching, not to think that, oh, I'm just like Srila Prabhupada, I'm going to just go blast everybody. No, we should preach in a humble way. Prabhadananda Saraswati explains in the Chaitanya Chandramrita that we should take a straw of the street in our teeth, and we should actually flatter people, say, you are so intelligent, you are so cultured, but just for one moment, please just put that aside just for a moment, and please consider the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we should preach in a very humble way. Also, Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about, he says, by the method of humble entreaty. So I think it's a big flaw in our ISKCON society all over the world, that devotees think, oh, Prabhupada preached boldly, I'm also going to smash people, just like Prabhupada. No, that doesn't work for you. It doesn't work for me. And better to live in humility, to preach in all humility, to live in humility, and show Prabhupada's the whole context of Srila Prabhupada's great preaching, which was most of all humility. So maybe somebody else has some
Hare
thoughts.
Krishna, thank you so much. We want to recognize His Grace Srivasvanacharya. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, you're welcome to the platform.
Prabhu, welcome.
Hare Krishna.
We are happy that Rukmini Mataji is here to enlighten us. Hare
Krishna.
Thank you for joining, Prabhu. Such an honor to be here with all of you.
So, Salika Prabhu, if you may unmute. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Masari. Thank you very much, Mother Rukmini Devi, for this beautiful, inspiring class. And let me start before asking a question by responding to your request that we should maybe comment on what's the take home for us in this class. There are so many takes home, actually, so many, and because you give so much insight into the text purpose, and with several reference to several stories. So there are so many take homes. But one thing that I think I want to comment on is the quote you mentioned about a sinner has a future and a saint has a past. I think that I'll hold as a reference to take home on this class. And
isn't that so hopeful? It's so hopeful.
Very
so
powerful.
Hopeful, powerful, but also hopeful, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Even a wretch like me can get amazing grace, right?
Thank you so much for that. It's actually so powerful and hopeful, like she said. So, but my question is, Sadev has asked the other side of the question, but the other side of the question of who decides who offend is that my meditation is we don't want to offend people sometimes genuinely, but we end up offending anyway. So my question is, how do we avoid being offended ourselves? Because you mentioned about when things are done genuinely, this is a genuine concern. Maybe someone has offended us genuinely, has done something. How not to feel offended? I'm wondering how to do this, because oftentimes you see that when someone does something that is unpleasant to us, we hardly find it easy to just take it as, okay, Krishna knows why this is happening. Maybe this is part of my karma. Most of the time we want to revenge. We want to act a bit against that. We want to respond to it in some ways to kind of even maybe revenge in some cases. So how do we come to that platform where we can quickly reflect and not be offended when we are genuinely offended?
Yeah, the best solution is to dwell in humility, right? And to give up pride, because revenge is like drinking poison. Wanting revenge is like drinking poison and hoping that the other person will die, right? It's like, I'm going to drink this poison. I hope that person will die. So the best solution is to keep a foundational place of humility and give up pride. Giving up pride is step numero uno, step number one on the path of bhakti. In the Manasiksha Raghunath Das Goswami, in his very beginning instructions, we must give up pride. Pride is dancing in the heart, like a complete, almost like a prostitute dancing in my heart, So I have to give up pride if I want to take step number one on the path of bhakti. And if I feel that someone's offended me, and I'm trying to be humble and trying to be offenseless and trying to understand that the super soul, everything good or everything bad that happens to me, the super soul is giving permission, right? That's the way a devotee walks the world. But when it's about someone else, that we see someone else being harmed or someone else being offended, then we have to see what we can do to help, Someone in the temple or someone outside of the temple, someone's acting inappropriately. What can I do to help? Because that's the way a devotee has to walk in this world, to try to help, to try to, have the right attitude to try to create systems, to try to bring attention of those who, maybe I can't do anything. Maybe I'm just a little skinny woman, and what can I do? But to maybe to bring attention of someone who can help more, you know. People are, sometimes they're great whistleblowers in our societies who bring attention to harm that's being caused to other people. So that takes great courage. So maybe I can't do anything, but maybe I can go to the temple authority, temple president. I can speak to Srivas Prabhu and say, hey, there's something very inappropriate going on in this temple, and I wanted to bring your attention to this poor devotee who's being harmed, who's being offended. Maybe that devotee won't speak up. There's a nice story. I remember being in Vrindavan, and the devotee was just wearing a very thin chadar. It was very cold, and Srila Prabhupada was calling out the temple president. He was saying about this devotee who was shivering. He was saying, he will not ask. He is a Vaishnava. But it's your duty as the temple president. You have to make sure that the devotees are taken care of, that they have warm clothing. So to bring attention, maybe I can't do anything, but maybe I can bring attention of someone who can do something. So to be very tolerant of offenses committed against me, or to not commit offenses to not just devotees, but any living being, and to try to bring attention when we see suffering in the world. This is the way a devotee walks the world. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we got to, thank you, Mother. We got to His Grace, Varaha Prabhu, please you may unmute.
Hare Krishna, Dandavatana.
Hare
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful class. There is a statement you made, which I would like to know if it is scriptural. And even if it is scriptural, I also want to.
Shumi Varaha Prabhu, can you increase your volume a little bit?
All right. So I'm saying that there is a statement made. There is, I would like to know if it is scriptural. And if it is scriptural, I also still want to make a comment on that. What is that statement? You said that the destination of the sinner and the one who points it out, the one who points out the person who has committed an offense, and the destination of the offender, both is the same.
Yeah, that's
so
one
first I want to.
Yeah,
it is a scripture.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also have a comment on that. My comment is this. From time past, in all civilizations, there's always been system of justice. And in system of justice, witnesses have to be called upon to ascertain certain things before judgment is passed. So if this is against scripture, then I want to know if actually the scriptural code can be adhered to all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So
Thank you. Thank you. Great question. So that's a verse I was quoting from that's coming up in the upcoming verses. It's Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st Canto, 17th chapter, 22nd verse. And Maharaj Parikshit is praising the bull, the personification of Dharma, that you know the truth of Dharma. And the same destination is intended for the perpetrator of irreligious acts, is also intended for one who identifies the perpetrator. But you know what? That has to be applied with compassion. And you know, the first thing that comes to mind for me is the really exemplary in South Africa. They have the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I think that's the proper name. The Commission on Truth and Reconciliation. That people who had harmed other people and sometimes even killed members of their family were brought together with the the family members, and in a very sensitive way, in a very compassionate and caring way, that person in like in community, being held in community, that person was able to admit and say, yes, I killed your son, and this is how I did it, and please forgive me. So, you know, if an offender like that can be called out with compassion in being held in community, you know, in our community here in Washington, D.C., we have someone that I love very much, Kunti Devi. She's the wife of Madhvacharya. She's from Ethiopia. And she says that in their culture in Ethiopia, if someone has addiction or has committed some offense or some crime, she said traditionally what they would do in their culture is they all actually physically stand around that person, actually literally physically hold that person in a circle and give compassion that we know that you've committed this offense or that you've had this addiction or this has happened or that's happened, but now we're holding you and we're here for you to help you heal. So I think that's a very sensitive application of this understanding, as is the Council Commission on Truth and Reconciliation, that can be done, that someone could be called out, but with compassion, within the mood of healing. So the point is, you know, if I call you out because you did something, I'm just as bad as the one who did it. Yeah, great. But if in community we can hold each other with compassion and forgiveness, that's transformational. That's really transformational. So yeah, I hope that's helpful. That's Shastra, the person who calls the person out. So therefore, in our ordinary lives, as we're just walking around the temple or the world or the city, you know, if if someone says, hey, you know, who did that? You know, we can just be a little bit lean toward forgiveness, right? Instead of leaning toward revenge or offending. We can say, yeah, that happened. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe that person didn't mean to. You know, it's really okay. It's okay. But then again, if someone in our community, if I see someone in our community being harmed, I shouldn't take that attitude. I should speak up as best I can, whatever agency I have. And if I don't have much agency, then bring it to someone who does, because that shouldn't be tolerated in our ISKCON communities or even in the world, you know. Yeah, I remember reading this quote from someone who was seeing I think it was Nigeria, someone who was seeing that little children were being transformed into soldiers and weapons themselves. How cruel that is, you know. So we have to really try to change the trajectory of our societies and to try to change the world with compassion, forgiveness, and examples. You know, I hope that's helpful.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much, Mother. We got to Kavikana Prabhu. Please unmute.
Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Prabhu, for allowing me. Hare Krishna, Mother. Thank you very much, Mother. I really enjoy your teachings, and as always. And today one is very impactful because it's a practical one on our daily spiritual practice. Avoiding offending devotees, and that makes me to remember one of my friends when I was in Mayapur. It's a very serious devotee. So I remember very clearly about this his attitude. If you go to him and say, "Oh, Prabhu, you see that Prabhu is like this," you say, "Prabhu, please, 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 don't tell me. Please, I don't want to hear. I don't want to hear. Please, please." He was very conscious about avoiding hearing about devotees' fault and finding fault in devotee. And each time I remember this devotee very clearly, and I admire this attitude in him. And I think I should practice that. But many times when devotees, either me or other devotees, we start talking about other devotees, their negative nature, I could not avoid it, and I will start enjoying it. I also, so instead of me to emulate this wonderful devotee and say, Prabhu, please, please, you know, I should not be respectful to someone who is offending devotee, because if I value my spiritual life, I just have to emulate that devotee. But somehow I find myself in a situation that you cannot do that. So how can we emulate that? Because in the long run, it's Krishna who will decide who is his pure devotee. Is Krishna who will decide. Is the one who we are directly related with him. So he's the one who will judge at the end. So Mother, my question is, how can we genuinely emulate this attitude? Thank you, Ma.
Thank you. Very, very important question. So we have to pray for that, because you're right. We do tend to enjoy that little juicy bit of gossip, right? We do tend to enjoy that, and then, I'm going to share it. Maybe it's not true. Maybe it wasn't necessary. Maybe, and definitely it's not kind. So maybe I heard something about this one or that one. I'm going to tell 10 people, and those 10 people are going to tell 10 people. And then what happens? The whole society comes tumbling down, So it's so crucial. So we have to really pray for this. And you have the example of that saintly devotee in your life. So we should pray for that quality. Pray, Krishna, help me. I don't want to be like the flies going to the open sores. I want to be like a honeybee going to the nectar. Please give me that ability. And the honeybees are so extraordinary because you know what? It's said in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that nectar that's in the flowers, we can't get that without the honeybees. The honeybees have to go into those flowers and bring it to us. So who are those honeybees? Those are the pure devotees, like the devotee you met in Mayapur, that we have to get that sweetness from them and not be like the flies going to the sores and then exacerbating the situation and creating a big propaganda of gossip all over the world, which is contaminated to the ether, lying propaganda, contaminating the ether. That's counteracted by the holy name. So let's cry to the holy name to follow that example. It's very, very urgent. Thank you so much.
So Ma, thank you, Ma. That brings me to the second question about praying, because you're now from the answer, it seems that prayer is the solution. So how can we genuinely cultivate this habit of, seeing our weakness and praying to Krishna to help? Because sometimes we think about this, but then when we come to chants or when we are in front of the deities, there is no this mood to pray for the strength to overcome this our weakness. So prayer is the key. Then how do we cultivate the mode of prayer? Maybe we are too proud, just like you mentioned, pride. So how do we get rid of this? Thank you, Ma.
Yeah, pride is the first step of the downfall, and humility, thankfulness. We should be vigilant. Humility, thankfulness. It said that pride. Let's see. Humility, gratefulness is a type of a soil, a type of a dirt that pride doesn't grow in that kind of dirt. When we're grateful, when we're humble. So we have to be vigilant, because we can just go through life with a la-di-da type of attitude, not really thinking about what we do, trampling, as I said, in our army boots, trampling on others and trampling on the world. And that's not the way a devotee acts or the way a devotee lives. We need to live with Prabhupada said Krishna consciousness, Tamal Krishna Maharaj used to say, first we have to become conscious before we can even become Krishna conscious. So what does that mean? To live with, to be vigilant, to be careful, to be discerning, what is it I'm doing? What is it I'm saying? I feel tempted to share a story. I might have shared this with all of you before, that there was a devotee in Vrindavan. He made an agreement with a rickshawala for a certain price. And if you've ever been to India, maybe it happens in Africa. So after he got to his destination, the rickshaw driver wanted a higher price, but they'd already agreed on a lower price. So then this devotee, he was from Europe somewhere, he got so angry at this poor Brajavasi rickshaw driver. He just took his fist and just smashed him. Pow! He was so angry. He was so unconscious. He just took his fist and smashed this guy. And this poor rickshawala who is like, we can't even imagine how poor someone is to have that job in one of these holy places like Vrindavan. He was so shocked that someone in the dress of a brahmachari or a sadhu from the West had done that, that he was so shocked. He just left the money there. He's like, I don't even want your money. And he just took his rickshaw and he was just going away. Like, he was shocked. And then what happened was that devotee, he lost his Krishna consciousness. He couldn't even chant anymore. It was several years before he was able to even chant or associate with devotees. He lost his whole taste for the whole path of Krishna consciousness. And only after a number of years was he again able to come back to try to chant, to try to serve. So we should be so cautious, so vigilant, and so humble, because pride is the big enemy. And we have that serpent of pride, each and every one of us we have that serpent living in our hearts. So we have to be so cautious. And it's not just devotees, it's every living being is dear to Krishna. So it's not that, just the devotees and then I'm on my own, no. So yeah, the answer is prayer, like Krishna is just sitting in our hearts, right? He's waiting to hear, well, what do you want? What do you want? He's waiting to fulfill our desires. So if we tell him, I want humility, I want gratitude, I want to be vigilant, I don't want to offend any living being, I want pride rooted out of my heart, please, 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 then Krishna will see that that's what we want, and he will fulfill our desires. But he's just waiting to see what we want, and then he can fulfill our desires. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I'm very grateful, ma'am.
Yeah. Gail, please, you may unmute. Hare Krishna. Good
Hare
to see
Krishna. Hare Krishna, Mother Rukmini.
Hare
Yeah. Yeah, I guess what I want to say is more like a comment than a question, referring to this issue of calling other people out. My thoughts on that are that the main objective of the false ego is to acquire a sense of superiority over others. And I feel that when we focus on the faults of others, it is a way of acquiring that sense of superiority. So I'm thinking that, because you were speaking about being compassionate when we have to call somebody else out. And I think a way to be compassionate is to first remember that, well, I have faults too. They may or may not be the same as that of the person who is being called out, but still faults are there. And I can ask myself, well, would I want somebody else to call me out for my faults in some kind of demeaning way?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's really, really important. And it brings to mind, have any of you read in the Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, where Srila Prabhupada's father, his father was a great pure devotee, a very simple man. And when he would chastise, Prabhupada was very naughty, and he would chastise Prabhupada, his son, and he would say, please forgive me, but this is my job. I'm your father. It's my duty to chastise you. Lord Chaitanya's father also used to chastise him. He was so humble that he used to apologize to his own son when he would chastise him. And you know what? Another important point here that you bring out, Gail, is that maybe this is part of my job. Maybe this is part of my duty. Maybe my job in the world, maybe I'm a police officer, or maybe I'm the zonal supervisor like Srivas Prabhu. And maybe if I go to Srivas Prabhu and said, this inappropriate thing is happening in the temple, and maybe if he says to me, oh, well, I can't call anyone out because then I'll be as bad as the perpetrator. No, his job, is to maintain the sanctity, the dharma, the dharmic atmosphere in the temple. So maybe it's your job. but then you have to do that appropriately, right? Yeah, without abuse, without excessive violence. And we have to see what is my position here, and if I don't have that position, maybe I can speak to someone who does, who can do something. So yeah, that again, that kind of like so-called, poisonous, but we think it's a sweet taste of feeling superior to someone else. It's very toxic, right? Thank you, Gail.
Thank you so much, Mother Rukmini. Lila Kishori Devi, please, you may unmute.
Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna.
Pranams, Mataji Rukmini Devi. It's so nice to hear you again and to be in your class. And one of my takeaways that I think is going to really help me was when you said that chanting japa and participating in Sankirtan, it's an obligation to the entire world. Because when we put that out into the atmosphere, we are counteracting all of this subtle energy of negativity and deceit. And so on the days when, there are days when you're chanting japa, it feels like you can't even breathe your next breath if you don't do your rounds. And then I have those days when it feels like, oh, am I only at round 8? And on those days, I think it'll just be really good to think this is not just about me. It is about me, but it's not just about me. And then I also loved how you spoke about those really intense boundaries when you said that that ahimsa, nonviolence, real ahimsa is freedom from envy. And I thought about when Jesus said to people, you have these commandments, you will not murder, you will not kill, but really to assassinate someone's character, to gossip, is to murder. He said, yeah, you have these commandments of no illicit sex, but to look at someone with lust is to practice illicit sex. And so this is he was at a much higher level than any of us, but this is a goal. This is a way to look at it, that I want that boundary around me. So then let me go to Krishna and ask, help me not to gossip, because that's murderous.
Yeah.
I may not stab you, but it's a murderous intent to assassinate your character. Absolutely. And then I also just really, really love the questions, and I love definitions too. And one of the definitions of to offend means to transgress, to step over a limit, to step over a boundary. Who decides that? Me. If my boundaries are courtesy and love and kindness and service, then if I'm reluctant to step over those with you, I probably won't offend you. And again, if those are my boundaries and you're being discourteous or unkind or unloving, I may need to step back and say, what's really happening with this person today? They seem to be really at the end of their rope because they're not patient. And I know when I overstep that boundary, I'm usually tired, hungry, angry, whatever, afraid. So I can ask, are you okay?
Yeah,
what's going on with you?
That's really beautiful. You're so right. We don't know what that person is going through, what that person is carrying. Maybe that person just lost their child, or maybe that person just heard that their beloved parent has just died. We don't know what they're carrying. So that's very, very wise. Thank you so much. And I think before we walk out of our, of our house each day, we should pray for that. Let me give up pride. Let me give up these lower qualities and be like a honeybee, and look to see how I can smooth someone's path today. And that's so sacred. How can I smooth someone's path today? Not only giving up envy, giving up pride, but how can I actually make their path smoother? So sacred. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mother Lila. And thank you, Mother Rukmini. Shumavara Prabhu, please, you may unmute. I'm surprised, Mother Rukmini. It seems, it says that the sun god has 3 speeds: slow, moderate, and fast. It seems the sun god is moving at a slow pace today. I was thinking or feeling that we've been here for like 2 hours, but we've been here for just 1 hour and 20 minutes. So I don't know if you still have like a few more minutes for us. Shumavara Prabhu, you may unmute.
Yeah, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Actually, my question is a follow-up of my first question. You see, we are in a religious community, and we accept the teachings with a simple mind, because we have faith and we are trying to be devotees. But we live in a world today that is becoming more and more critical of religion. And one of the things people say nowadays in criticism of religion, and it's not just that they are saying, it's also historical fact, that religion wants to make you become a sheep. Just follow and be and don't talk. And we have seen this kind of tool being used by Christianity, Islam. And many of us who join Krishna consciousness actually out of being revolting against a system that we found to be abusive. So if we are presenting Krishna consciousness as a superior, higher, philosophy, but the same, trend is there. It's like it's parallel. It's in all religions that all followers should be sheep and shouldn't talk, even when they are abused or when something goes wrong. It's better you just say you don't. Maybe it's God who wants it that way. And if you see somebody doing something wrong, no, you shouldn't say it. You will be offending them, or you will be, damaging your spiritual life. And this type of consciousness has been used to silence people over the years, and a lot of abuses has been perpetrated according to that. So I just want to know how much you can stress this, without making people to feel that it's another religion to make people become sheep. So this is what I want to, get clarification about. Thank you.
Thank you. Very intelligent question. So, people have to learn discernment. Who will I follow? Will I follow the politician? Will I be a sheep of some political party, like lemmings jumping off the cliff, following some political leader? Or will I use my discernment? Who will I follow? Where will I give my allegiance? And that takes discernment. It takes humility and discrimination. And then Krishna can give intelligence. And when I see something inappropriate, to be able to bring that to someone who can do something about it, right? Not to be a blind follower. What Bhaktivinoda Thakur said something about useless critics and blind followers are the two enemies of progress. So we don't want to be useless critics, and we don't want to be blind followers either. So when we see something inappropriate, we have to bring it to the attention of someone who can help, and use our discrimination, our discernment. Who will I follow? Where will I serve? And not be like lemmings jumping off a cliff just because everybody else is doing that. And the fact is, there's been so much impropriety in all religions. We've had cheaters in the Krishna consciousness movement as well. We've had people who've done many inappropriate things in the Krishna consciousness movement as well. And so that's been very tragic that people have lost faith in the beautiful, precious gifts that Srila Prabhupada has brought. So we have to be careful that we don't cause the same problem for others, right? So mostly, people in the dress of holy people doing cheating things has caused many people in the world to give up faith in religion. So, but we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? So maybe there's a lot of cheaters everywhere, and this is Kali Yuga. There'll be more fakes than there will be real diamonds. So we have to learn discernment, and by studying Srila Prabhupada's books, by chanting the holy name, by praying very sincerely, we can gain discernment. Where should I hear? Who should I hear from? Just like you so beautifully said, Prabhu, about the devotee you met in Mayapur and how struck you were by his saintliness. So to try to learn discernment, that this is the place where I'm going to spend my time. This is the person I want to hang out with, and just when other people are agitating, irritating, causing problems, then, whoops, I'm sorry, I have an appointment, I got to go, or if they're harming someone else, bring it to the attention of the authorities, either the temple authorities or sometimes the civil authorities, because people shouldn't be allowed to abuse other people. So yeah, we have to be authentic representatives of true religion. Otherwise, we ourselves will cause people to lose faith in all religion, right? Religion is the opiate of the people, but really mostly opium is the opiate of the people, right? Or politics is the opiate of the people, or you could say pride is the opiate of the people. So we have to become real representatives of Srila Prabhupada. Thank you. Is there one more question? I think, or is that, are we good? Are we good?
No, that was a very question you answered.
Very good.
So if anyone has any comment, otherwise I think Mother Rukmini may have to leave.
Thank you all so much for inviting me. I've never been anywhere in Africa in my whole life, so thank you for inviting me to Ghana.
Please, Ma, come to Africa. Very nice, beautiful place.
I've heard.
We have received Anutama Prabhu once in Ghana.
Oh yes, you know, my son has been, my husband has been, but they just leave me home. So.
Well, Mataji, it's your time to come.
Haribo. I'm coming on your beautiful Zoom call, so thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you very much. Thank you all for tolerating me and taking this time. My presentation, which was full of frailties, as Prabhupada said so humbly, right?
We are just honored to have your association, Mother.
Thank you. I'll say what Prabhupada said. Please forgive my frailties and Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. So Shivas Vanachari, if you have something to conclude on before we bring the class to a close.
Well, I would just say a big thank you to Her Grace Rukmini Devi Dasi for honoring our invitation, not once, not twice, always. And anytime she comes, she enlightened us. She gave us some very practical philosophy, not theoretical. We love you. Please come again and enlighten us more and more.
Thank you for your very broad-minded hearts. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.
So,
dear devotees, at this point, we're going to humbly request all of you to kindly unmute, and then we chant the loudest Hare Krishna Maha Mantra to express.
Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare
well, thank you for purifying the ether. Hare Krishna.
Oh, you have purified us all.
Thank you, Ma.
Thank you. Her Grace Rukmini Devi Dasi Mataji ki jai. Our regards to Anutama Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So we hope to see you all again tomorrow. Thank you for being here. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Jai, jai, jai.